right, looks like we are live. So, welcome to our Tech Talk for this afternoon. Um, we will be talking about how to spot fake news today. So, this is one of our tech talks, one of our lectures on timely technology topics. I figured as we're about 2 weeks out, little less than 2 weeks out from the election, this is a pretty timely topic. So, we will be taking a look at how to spot fake news today. So we've got some people joining us. This is a class that we did teach when we were doing in-person classes previously. I've adapted it slightly for this type of format. So there are some disclaimers within it that apply more to in-person classes than they do when I'm just talking to you into my computer, essentially. But these are good things to keep in mind when you are looking at news stories, when you're looking for information about politics or health or really anything, any information you consume online, these are good things to keep in mind. So it looks like we've got a good set of folks joining us. So we'll jump right into it. This is, again, how to spot fake news. This will be recorded and available on the library's Facebook page if you want to come back to it at a later time or you want to recommend it to somebody else. We also have a bunch of other Tech Talks and Appy Hour sessions available there too. So if you've been missing our classes, you wish you could hear from the technology trainers more often, you can definitely check there. They're also available on our YouTube channel too. So my name is Anne. I'm a technology trainer with the library. My colleague Jackie and I have been going back and forth with the programs that we've been presenting. So you'll hear my voice on some of those presentations. You'll hear Jackie's voice on some of those presentations. And some of you may have been in our classes previously too. So one thing to note as we start how to spot fake news is that this really isn't a partisan issue. This occurs across both ends, all ends of the political spectrum. So we're trying to keep politics out of this discussion because we're trying to remain neutral with everything. So while we're trying to apply to all ends of the political spectrum with this course, news literacy across the board is just necessary. Information that you are looking up, especially online, it's important that you're informed. It's important that you are aware of how these things can be written or shared widely without giving you the full picture of what the true story is, whether it's completely false or whether just parts of it are false or it's written in a specific way. I should also mention my colleague Jackie is monitoring our our comment section. So if you have any questions or comments, you can put those questions there. And let's get into probably the biggest thing, which is defining what fake news actually is. Fake news, the term fake news is kind of recent. We saw this kind of surge to popularity in around 2016. But the concept of fake news is nothing new, of course. There have been stories of crazy stories or half-true stories that have circulated basically as long as journalism or just news discussions have been around. But fake news for our context is news or information that misrepresents facts through satire or sensationalism in order to evoke an emotional reaction or to get you to share it. This has become really, really popular with social media, of course. We want to be able to share things with our friends. We come across something really interesting. We want other people to see it. So fake news has really kind of exploded as a concept since the internet has become a thing, and especially since social media has become popular. So that's why you're hearing about it a lot more. Now, there are a variety of different forms that fake news can take. One of them is imposter content, so that looks like it's from a legitimate news source, but it's actually not. We'll talk a little bit later of some of the red flags that you'll come across with that. There are, of course, just straight out hoaxes, things that are completely false. Misinformation is something we've been seeing a lot with the COVID-19 pandemic. There's been a lot of information that's shared, especially on social media, that's just blatantly not true. There's also conspiracy theories, so trying to come up with a larger story behind certain happenings. There's straight up propaganda, whether this is state sponsored or just in general trying to push a specific agenda. And speaking of agendas, there's the hidden agenda as well. So this is a lot more subtle, a lot more influential. It may be trying to get you to buy something or try something out. So there are a lot of different forms that fake news can actually take. Now, of course, one of the big questions is why? Why would somebody want to put fake news out there? And something we talk about a lot in our computer classes, especially internet basics, is that there's really nobody monitoring the internet. There's no internet police fact checking. So anyone can put any information out there on the internet. Why would they do that? Well, money. If they put a sensational headline on it, tons of people click on that link, they're generating ad revenue typically. And that can be a big red flag. If you see tons of ads on a website, maybe you want to tread lightly and be a little skeptical because they may be trying to just make money rather than actually report the facts. There's also, of course, power, whether that's trying to influence your vote, influence your actions, influence what you think about a certain person or a certain thing. People will try and exert their power through misinformation, through fake news. There's also entertainment. If you have ever read Onion articles, you've seen those satire websites that often have a very humorous spin on things. That's entertainment, mainly for you in that case, but there are cases where the person posting the fake news is getting entertainment value out of it by seeing this fake story actually spread. So something to keep in mind. And there's also just plain old sloppiness, whether it's not reporting things accurately, only kind of half reporting information. This happens a lot with medical studies, medical information. They'll have some sort of like sensational headline and really focus on a specific topic, but that's not actually the whole story. That doesn't actually explain what's going on. So there are also a couple of factors of why we fall for fake news or why we are more likely to share fake news. One of them is just plain old brain chemistry. The way our brains are wired, we like things that agree with what we already believe. This is called confirmation bias, and it means that whatever information we read, if it confirms our belief, we favor that far more than information that might have the same kind of factual information. But if it has a contrary viewpoint, then we're just less likely to agree with it, to actually agree with what it's saying. So that's something to keep in mind. Just because you read something and say, oh, that's not true, that doesn't necessarily mean it's fake. It may just be that your brain is saying, whoa, that doesn't agree with what we already believe. And that's where you're getting that sensation of it must be fake. So keep that in mind. Kind of keep track of when you have those reactions and also just general emotional reactions to news. I will catch myself doing this on a regular basis. I'll see something on social media, I'll see a headline somewhere, and my brain will go, whoa, that doesn't seem right. And I have to stop a minute and delve deeper, delve beyond the headline to see, well, is that actually not true, or is that just my confirmation bias coming to light? Another factor, and this is very much related to social media, is we have kind of set ourselves up to be in echo chambers. The way that social media works, the way social media is designed, is it wants to make us happy. It wants to show us information that we're going to like or information that's similar to what we've already interacted with. Things that we've liked on Facebook, things that we've commented on, things that we've retweeted on Twitter. And there was recently a Pew Research study that found that about 55% of American adults get their news at least partially from social media. So social media is specifically going to tie into that confirmation bias. If you only read or interact with liberal news sources on social media sites, that's all you're going to see. You're never going to break out of that echo chamber and see other news sources, which can be an issue. We don't see kind of the full rounded picture. You do get that bias. And we'll talk about biased sources a little bit later on too. So if you do come across an article and you just a little skeptical of it, and honestly, every article you come across, I would be a little bit skeptical of, because we are trying to train our brains to think critically about where this news is coming from. So there are some things to consider. These are some main questions, some main topics that you should consider with every article. So one is, can it be verified? Typically, if something is being reported in multiple sources, it's more likely to be true. Not 100% to be true. But if you're only finding it in one specific source, that's a pretty big red flag. Now, each of the different sources you might consult might have a different spin on that particular event or on a quote or on whatever's happening in the world. But if you're seeing references in multiple places, maybe across the political spectrum when we talk about the different biases of sources, that's a pretty good indication that something is accurate there. Another thing to consider is, does it appeal to your emotions? This is kind of if it seems too good to be true or it seems too bad to be true, it probably isn't true. So legitimate news sources will do this too. They'll have some sort of sensational headline. They'll pull out a very kind of juicy quote to use. But that is kind of driving your emotions and driving you to share it with other people. Another thing to keep in mind is who the author is, who actually wrote this article, when was it written, where was it published? Does this seem like a legitimate news source? We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But just because something's posted to Facebook doesn't necessarily mean it's from a real place. Anyone can copy and paste a link and share it on Facebook. And another thing that's important to remember is to read beyond the headline. There have been all sorts of studies on this, of the percentage of people who just share something after reading the headline is really, really high. There have been all sorts of kind of funny articles where they'll have that sensational headline, and if you actually click on it, it'll say, oh, good job, you actually read beyond it, which is much more than other people do. Now, when you are looking at those articles, you're trying to determine if this is a legitimate story or not, there's some red flags that you should keep an eye out for. So that includes things like all caps in the headlines. They're very, very specific style protocols that journalists have to follow, and all caps, not one of them. So if you're seeing all caps, be a little bit skeptical. That's, again, that sensationalism, that emotional reaction, because all caps kind of looks like you're yelling. That's how we interpret it on the internet. If you're seeing excessive ads as well, that's an indication that this website is trying to get money. From every time you click on an article, and that's probably driving their interest rather than actually reporting and telling the truth. Another thing to keep an eye out for, and this goes with that reading beyond the headline, checking to see if it's a legitimate source, is looking at the URL, looking at the web address. On this particular slide, we see bbc.com-latest-news.xyz, which underneath it, you can see it has the BBC logo and it says news, there's a menu, but that's not actually the BBC website. That little extra bit at the end means it is an entirely different website. We also see things like abcnews.co.uk or something like that. Even that subtle little change at the end of a URL means it's a completely different website. Also, keep an eye out for, again, listing the author. If there's no author, that's a pretty big red flag. Then you really don't know who wrote the article. Also, keep an eye on publication dates. It's become kind of common for stories that are old, that are sometimes several years old, to circulate again on social media and kind of gain a following. But because nobody reads beyond the headline, they don't realize that this is a 5-year-old article. Or if there's just no publication date at all, that's another big concern. Then you don't know how relevant or how accurate that information is, because information, of course, can change quickly over time. Now, if you're still not quite sure, and if this is maybe a very popular story that's circulating on social media, we do have this list of places that you can check your facts. These are professional fact checkers. They will delve into currently happening stories and give you an idea of how accurate or what the particular spin on a story might be. So one is factcheck.org, where they will delve into stories that are currently trending. All Sides is also kind of an interesting source in that they will pull in conservative, kind of centrist, and liberal interpretations, different news articles about the same event. So you can kind of compare how different news sources are writing about a particular event, and they'll kind of show them side by side. The Washington Post fact checker is independent from the Washington Post. They're kind of part of that overhead, but they do have independent fact checkers. They have their Pinocchios, so it'll rate how false a statement is or how true a statement is on a scale of Pinocchios. PolitiFact has their Truthometer, so they, of course, are primarily fact-checking political facts, political statements made by politicians and others. So they will have this little meter that will say, true, mostly true. Pants on fire is when it's absolutely false. So you can check on PolitiFact and see. They often will do fact-checking for social media sites, like Twitter will say, oh, this has been confirmed as being true or confirmed as being false, using PolitiFact as a source. There's also good old-fashioned Snopes. Snopes is perhaps better known for urban legend debunking, but they do a lot of fact-checking on social media trends. So even if you're seeing somebody post of, you have to post this, otherwise Facebook has access to all of your information, you can go on Snopes and double check and see, is that actually true? I'll give you a hint. It almost never is true. But Snopes does really in-depth fact-checking about not just politics, but all sorts of trends that go around on social media especially. And Media Bias Fact Check has a ranking of tons of different news sources and what their bias actually is, whether they're kind of left-leaning, right-leaning, centrist, are they pro-science, anti-science, that type of thing. And they will also pull together fact-check documents daily or weekly from some of these other sources, so you can kind of see what information is out there and how it's been verified by different places. Now, this next slide might be kind of hard to see. We're going to see if I can zoom in, but this is from, this is the media bias chart. It's from Ad Fontes Media. This is the 6th version of this. And they have a procedure of plotting news sources. So not individual articles. They do take articles into account. But individual news sources on what essentially ends up as a bell curve. So this is ranking them from left to right in terms of their bias, left being liberal in the American political sphere, right being conservative, and also how reliable they are. So whether they're doing original fact reporting, just reporters on the ground saying who, what, where, why, not so much why, who, what, where, whether they're doing more analysis or whether they're completely fabricating information. So let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. Oop. So I'll zoom in here at the top. So these are some of the news sources that are considered neutral. So they are relatively neutral, relatively close to balanced or centrist. And also they primarily do original fact reporting, not a ton of analysis, just the facts. So we do see some familiar names. So AP and Reuters, makes sense. They do a lot of original fact reporting. NPR is here, ABC, PBS, a lot of network news. CNN is a little bit left and a little bit further down. So they're a little bit more into the analysis realm rather than individual fact reporting. Original fact reporting. That's what I'm trying to say. So you can kind of see some potentially familiar names. MSNBC, for example, is further to the left. Fox News is going to be further to the right. But you can definitely take a look at this. It's at adfontismedia.com and see where the news sources you consult actually lie on this particular curve. That doesn't mean they're not going to be outliers in some of these news sources. An important thing to keep in mind is there's a difference between columnists and journalists. So columnists are those opinion pieces. They tend to show the individual's bias much more than a journalist tends to in articles. So that's something to keep in mind. If it's listed as an opinion piece, you're more likely to see bias in that than original reporting. So that's pretty much what we have for today. Essentially, be aware of where your information is coming from, where those sources are coming from. Ask yourself those questions. Can it be verified? Can you find this elsewhere? Does it appeal to your emotions? That's one that, as we've been teaching that course, really sticks with me, of when I kind of feel emotional reactions of, oh, this is like so adorable that this person did that, or oh, that's so horrible that this other person said something. It's a moment for you to kind of step back and ask yourself, is that actually what happened? Is this something that is more sensationalized? Where can I potentially find a more even-handed account of this? But it is really up to you to keep an eye out, to be aware of the information that you're consuming, and making sure you make good choices with the information you're consuming. That's not to say you can't consult the news sources you prefer, certainly, but just be aware of their potential biases, essentially. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the comment box. We'll hang out for a little while longer if you have any questions or comments. And like I mentioned, this is being recorded, so you can watch it in the future on the library's Facebook page. You can share it with other people as well. We also have all of our other Facebook Live events. So our other tech talks, we've covered things like cutting the cord. We've covered a bunch of different library resources. We've covered a variety of different apps, free apps or mostly free apps that you can download on a variety of topics, everything from food delivery apps to learning from home to learning a language. So all of those are available on the library's Facebook page. You can also watch them on YouTube as well. So if you've got any questions, you can put them in the comment box. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap things up. All right. Well, have a good day and make sure to think critically about the news that you're consuming. Bye.